Coming up on today's edition of Locked On Eagles, the NFL Scouting Combine is just in a few days. Louie and Gino Camilleri, we are going to preview the Combine players we're going to watch on offense and defense. That's coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We thank you for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcome into a Saturday edition of the show, guys. It's episode number 5 of 5 this week. Download it into your phone wherever you get the podcast, and we're available on all platforms, YouTube as well in video form. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. We've got YouTube exclusive content as well on our channel. And we're on Twitter at Locked On Birds, at DiBiase, LOE, at GC24_football. Just a few days away, Gino, from the NFL Scouting Combine on Tuesday. You know, we dove more into the philosophical perspective of the Combine, talked about the pros and cons of it for both prospects and teams, how much stock actually to put into it when a player has a really good day, when they really struggle in their workouts, the meetings as well. You can check out that podcast as well as the other 4 on all platforms. Today, when it comes to our Combine preview, we're going to dive more specifically into players that we're going to watch because, Gino, as we kind of said on Tuesday, you know, the Combine can hurt a lot of players, but it can also help and kind of confirm things we knew, or, you know, a player might flash and run faster than we thought, and we go back to the tape and we kind of change our perspective. So I think it has its pros and cons for sure. And you just got to, you know, weigh both. And there's some players definitely to watch in this one that there's, you know, real stock to.
Oh, there are tons of freak athletes in this lineup. I mean, you're going to look all around each of the positions, really, even starting at quarterback. Malik Willis should come out there and really test through the moon. And then you look at the defensive back position. I think all of those guys in first-round consideration, like the Sauce Gardners, the Kyer Elams, the Andrew Booth Juniors, those guys move really well. And at that position, you have to be able to do that. And I look at the Combine as connecting one of the areas that Howie Roseman really harped on to the team building process. Can they run? Are they healthy? Do they love football? And you could find all 3 of those out at the NFL Scouting Combine, because in the interviews, you'll find out how much they really love the sport. You're going to find out if they run in the 40s, if it's the 10-yard or 20-yard for the linebackers, defensive tackles, so be it. And you're going to find out if these guys have a healthy track record during the medicals. And you could see these medical scans. They'll show you how much more they can grow into their frames. Do they have a degenerative issue in one of their, let's say, their knee or their shoulder? Yeah. Carson Strong, for example, at the quarterback position, that'll be intriguing to see there. It's really just a science experiment to an extent. That's the way I look at it. You're really just forming a hypothesis on a player based around more evidence that you're getting in this step, which really is what you see on TV is only a percentage of it, like I mentioned the other day.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's a big percentage for some teams,
especially if you're big on traits, you know, if you're more willing to take, you know, chances on guys with upside that might not have the best tape or production, but their, you know, physical gifts are off the charts and they show that on the field. 100%, you know, let's start with offense, because there are some players to watch on both sides here that we're going to be keeping a close eye on next week. Is there a player specifically on offense that first comes to mind that you can't wait to watch that, you know, could maybe not make or break, you know, his stock or change your opinion of him, but someone you're watching closely for one reason or another?
I think I'm going to take a look at like the bigger bodied receivers, right? Like you look at Drake out of USC, you look at Christian Watson, right? Those guys, you look at the tape and you're like, okay, they can separate, but then to go and see how they can stride and how they can get out of their stance at that height and maintain and get up to speed in just a few steps in the NFL. And yeah, I see you put Treylon Burks down.
I was already ready for it, man. That was the players on offense for me to watch too.
Those big guys really have to run well in this. I go back to a couple years when Antonio Gandy Golden, right? It was kind of debated. Some people liked him. Some people thought he couldn't separate. Goes out there, runs decently slow, goes to Washington, doesn't really do anything and then gets cut. So you're going to find out, especially for those bigger guys, because most small guys, to get to that point to where they are, they have to be able to be quick. They have to be able to be elusive, right? It's can those bigger guys, even going back to Philly, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, right? We see him, guy can't separate, but you look at Treylon Burks, you look at Christian Watson, even a guy who's a few inches shorter than them, and Romeo Dobbs or Dubs, however you want to say it. Those bigger guys really can excel and I would say raise their stock to meet that athletic threshold that maybe some of the smaller guys really already have hit on their tape, right?
Yeah.
Like you're going to turn on the tape of a guy like Wan'Dale Robinson out of Kentucky, and you don't really need to say, oh, I need to see this guy's 40 time. He gets to the second and third level faster than a Ferrari.
Or like Jameson Williams heading towards
exactly.
ACL, Garrett Wilson, we know about his ability to separate. I'm with you, man. I wrote the exact same thing. For me, it's watching the big wide receivers, because this is the receiver that all Eagles fans want right now, right? They want that Alshon Jeffrey, that power forward, to go along with Devontae Smith and Quez Watkins, because it would be the perfect complement. But again, the key here is to not force a role like you try to do with Jalen Reagor in 2020. If you're a J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, if you can't separate, as much as you want a big wide receiver, you can't force that need, even if, he can go up and high point the football. If Drake London really doesn't test out well, and if you see all these contested catches and it's impressive, but you're more concerned about how often he had to do it because he couldn't separate, that's something you got to take a look at for sure. I think with Treylon Burks, though, it's a little bit different. I think London here is where the bigger question arises in that area. But Treylon, man, Gino, he is such a fun watch because he is huge. With Drake London, the two biggest receivers that are going to be picked on day one, or they're both going to be first-round picks, if at worst, early second-round picks. Treylon Burks, though, can flat out fly. I'm really excited to see what he runs in the 40 and see the receiver drills, how explosive he comes out. Because if a guy like that with that frame can also separate, we're talking about a potential budding star, and that's somebody that maybe might not even fall to the Eagles at 15 overall, 16 or 19. So yeah, they have to be able to separate for sure. And again, you don't want to force this need. So you want them to give you a reason to pick them over a Jahan Dotson if you want one, right? Because it's an added bonus if they have that size, because that's kind of what you want.
I would say that's exactly how you have to approach this. And taking a look back, I think you could take a lot away from that JJ and DK Metcalf draft, right?
Yeah.
Because people overthought that DeKalin Metcalf pick so bad. They said, oh, this guy's 3 cone is terrible. He doesn't really run many in and out.
Talk about putting too much stock into a combine. It's specifically one drill.
Big time. And now if Treylon Burks goes and runs a 4.43, you're going to say, okay, this guy does it on tape. He did it against Alabama at the highest level. Comes out to Indianapolis, runs a good time. If he runs a quick 40, I would call it a day for Treylon Burks. Like, that's all he needs to show
wide receiver 1, probably over Garrett Wilson at that point.
I would believe so. Look at the rest of the guys. Jameson Williams, you can look at Olave if you like that flavor of it. None of them have that size and that ability to be a 3-level threat. And at the same time, physically dominate everybody else out on the
Arkansas
field,
used him in the screen game a lot too, Gino. They used him.
I know. I watched
all 3 levels.
Boatload of Treylon Burks, my man. And you look at the Jameson Williams of the group, right? And you look at Garrett Wilson's. They're very, very good at a lot of respective things. But I don't think they do everything as complete as a guy like Treylon does. So that's where this drill in particular, and getting from our point on the philosophy of it to the players, this is a real-life example of where things could really shift, because if he comes and runs a 4.6, he might fall 10 spots or so. It's not going to push him out of the first or second round, but it's going to make teams say, okay, maybe there is a little bit of issue in his ability to separate. But that's for the teams to decide. It's just up to the players now to go and run that time. I want to see the big guys, especially on the defensive line as well. The linebackers, I think, are going to test especially freakish.
Because it's the tiebreaker, man. Look, you don't want to force it again and take the big guy just because he's big if the other players do everything else better. But if Treylon Burks shows he can separate just as much and he looks just as explosive as a Olave or a Dotson, Well, they're not 6'3", 6'4", so that's the guy you're going to go with, especially with the way the Eagles core is, currently built. So you can definitely tell we've been doing a podcast together for 4 years because we definitely saw eye to eye on that one for sure. Gino, we'll get more into some players to watch on offense and defense coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles as we preview the 2022 NFL Scouting Combine in Indianapolis. And guys, today's show is sponsored by the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's BetOnline. BetOnline.net is the number one spot for all your sports betting needs. Football might be over this season, but the off season is continuing, and you can bet on free agent props, the draft too. You're going to be able to select who you think is going to be the first wide receiver taken. Is it Treylon Burks? Is it somebody like Garrett Wilson? You've got the NBA in full steam right now. College basketball, March Madness is right around the corner. You've got the NHL, boxing, UFC, right to the Olympic coverage and information. BetOnline, again, remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. From the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where the next fired coach is going to land, they're your number one spot. And make sure you head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action, because BetOnline is where the game starts. All right, Eagles fans, welcome back into this Saturday edition of the show, episode 5 of 5, downloaded into your phone wherever you get your podcast. We thank you for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. He's Gino Camilleri. I'm Lou DiBiase. We are previewing the 2022 NFL Scouting Combine. Both of us are taking a close eye on the wide receivers that are the bigger wide receivers. Treylon Burks from Arkansas, USC wide receiver Drake London. I think, Gino, too, you could talk about Pickens from Georgia, Ross from Clemson. There's just those guys in that area, too. Christian Watson even, although I think we know he's going to test out pretty well. So those bigger wide receivers are the players we want to test out really well, because that's kind of the receiver that we want for the Eagles right now, and a lot of fans want. You're not going to force it like you did with Rager. We learned that lesson, and if those guys you don't believe are better than a Olave, you would take an Olave, but you prefer the guy with the bigger frame. Gino, one guy I'm keeping a close eye on too, sticking at receiver real quick before we move on, is actually Penn State wide receiver Jahan Dotson. I took away one of the key things from Daniel Jeremiah's yearly press conference the other day. He said he thinks Jahan Dotson has the best hands of these wide receivers in this prospect pool. And right now, I think he's below most of the guys that we mentioned, but I would agree. I would tend to agree, looking at some of the catches Dotson made throughout his time at Penn State, just how easy the ball comes into those hands. If he clocks in at like in the 4.3s or low 4.4s, it's again going to be a tough conversation. Like, it's with this wide receiver class, it's kind of pick your poison, and Dotson could be kind of the best of everything and maybe a little overlooked right now just based on the depth of the class up top.
I kind of equate a guy like Jahan Dotson, not skill-wise, but just situationally, to a guy like Devontae Smith, right? A lot of good wide receivers have come out of Penn State over the last couple of years. You have Allen Robinson, who's a few years prior to that.
I need my board, KJ
Godwin,
Hamler, to stay healthy.
KJ Hamler. I look at all those players, and I really take parts of all of their game, and I see that in Jahan Dotson, right?
Good point.
Because Franklin's been there for quite some time. He wants the same in all of his receivers. Dotson is involved really all over the field. He has very good hands. He's not as big as a guy like Godwin. He comes in more at like 5'11", but that's not a small receiver by any means. I mean,
he can high point the football, man, just like Smith and Watkins. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's one of the – exactly, Lou. Great. Because when you have players that aren't 6'4", right, they still have to be able to go up and make a play.
Yeah.
That's why one of the drills, I'd say the most important drill for wide receivers, is the vertical jump.
Yep.
Because you have to see what these guys, outside of defensive backs, everybody else's money is made on the ground. As a wide receiver, a majority of your money is made in the air. And I think Dotson, with his hands, I think he's going to test very, very well.
I
and
agree.
He could be a guy that goes and just has like a freakish vertical jump, and it wouldn't even shock me, because they have strong athletes at the wide receiver position at Penn State. That's really what they look for. I have a good relation with a kid who used to work in the recruiting department there. They just really want athletes there, and Power 5 guys, those 5 stars, they really come in as these good athletes where you just have to build their game. Dotson has really become a very efficient and effective receiver, and he does everything with the size that I like at my guys, because 5'11", it's not undersized. It's not too overbearing to where you kind of get drilled into one area. He might be maybe an inch and a half smaller than Devontae Smith and Quez Watkins. That's prime territory for me, where if you wait till, let's say, early day 2 or maybe even into the later round of the second round, Dotson is a prime candidate. And you're not – I always say every time we talk about Penn State guys, he's an easy fan favorite if he comes to Philadelphia.
Oh, yeah.
And we've been shouting from the rafters to go get a Chris Godwin or an Allen Robinson. Hey, you got a chance to grab another guy right here if you want to out of Penn State.
And he's interchangeable, Gino, with Smith
Yes.
and Watkins. All three of those guys can play, I think, all three spots. That's the thing is with Dotson, he played a lot inside of Penn State, but I think he can play the X and the Z, and I think those three would be a really nice fit.
Mm-hmm.
Some teams, again, you want to fit that basketball kind of lineup, and we would love that with Treylon Burks or a Drake London, but there's a lot of other teams like the Bills and 49ers that would prefer to have all three receivers be interchangeable, and I wouldn't mind that either. I want production at this position, and if the Eagles decide to go early at one of these spots, Dotson's somebody that I think both of us are keeping a close eye on. Gino, let's continue. Let's keep talking some players that we're watching in practice for the Combine next week. Who else are you keeping a close eye on?
I think the top 5, and to some it might differ, my top 5 edge rushers, David Ojabo, Jermaine Johnson, Kayvon Thibodeau, George Karlaftis, Aiden Hutchinson. Because I think all of them, completely different body sizes, all insane athletes in their own right. You look at Karlaftis and you're like, okay, this guy doesn't look like he's going to be an unbelievable athlete. Some of his high school numbers for like track are outrageous. And I've heard from multiple people that he should test very well. I had one person that I talked to that said he might test better than a guy like Hutch at some of the drills, like some of the 3-cone drill where he has to get around. He might have a little bit more bend to his game than a guy like Hutch. And that's why I want to look at it, because Kayvon Thibodeau doesn't look like Jermaine Johnson, who doesn't look like David Ojabo, who doesn't look like Aiden Hutchinson and Karlaftis, right? All of these guys come in different shapes and sizes. And that's what I look at the wide receiver and the edge group, that Baskin-Robbins-esque type of feel where it's like, okay, KT could come in, run a great 10-yard split, show it off his bend, but hey, do you want a better run stopper in Jermaine Johnson, who also is going to come in and he was lasered, according to our friend Brennan Olson at Locked On Florida Gators, at like a 4.46 for a 6'4" defensive end. And then Ajabo's a freak. Aiden Hutchinson's going to test through the moon. That
I love
group
watching
alone.
I love watching the crazy athletic edge rushers perform in the Combine, because you're like, man, this dude, you already see what a giant they are. And then when they clock wide receiver time, it's like, oh my gosh. Again, it goes
running
back to
like Darren Sproles type of
and that goes back to why I need my quarterback to be mobile, because guys like Jermaine Johnson are coming into the league, and David Ojabo. Gino, I too thought George Karlaftis was somebody to watch because he has the floor, the high floor. He has the strong run stopping ability. He has the motor. And again, with me, I think everybody knows me as somebody that kind of gets turned off by the word motor, but it's more, again, when you have to say that to cover up other things. With Karlaftis, again, with you, I agree. I think he's going to test out better than most people think. And I hope that's the case, because if he shows, I want to see what kind of athlete he is, because he's a safer prospect than somebody like David Ojabo. But again, if somebody like that is clearly limited, then I start to think, okay, he could be a B Derek Barnett kind of starter. But does he have any sort of star potential? Is he worth a first-round pick? I'm not putting Karlaftis in there. That's just my point with, high floor players sometimes that have a lower ceiling. So Karlaftis is somebody I really want to see how he does test this week.
Yeah, I mean, look at Josh Sweat versus David Barnett when they tested out. Or Derek Barnett. What am I saying? David Barnett is not even a real person. Derek Barnett, those two, completely different looks to their body, complete different ability when they're rushing the passer, and that shows in the drills. I expect a guy like David Ojabo, who really has that, I would just say, pure athlete look and feel to him when you watch him on tape, should test especially well at like the short shuttle, where you have to get in and out, maintain your balance, and just stop your feet, take long strides, and close in under 4.5 seconds. That's what it comes down to in these drills, just being able to be a good athlete. These top 5 guys, Lou, all fit that mold. And like you said, to see a 6'4" to 6'6" player move like a guy like Darren Sproles could, you make a great point. one of these guys is going to be in the NFC East. The Giants are getting one of them.
Yeah,
we have
they're
to
gonna
face
take
reality.
one. Trayvon Walker, too, we didn't bring up either. Like another interchangeable
100%.
piece that can play inside and out. One of them's going to be a Giant. Thibodeau's kind of the favorite right now with a lot of mock drafts because they expect him to fall a little bit. You would not like that for sure.
I would not let the NFL. That would be the fourth Oregon Duck in a row in 4 consecutive seasons that they've really botched it on, or 3 consecutive seasons. Justin Herbert, the whole Penny Sewell ordeal, Javon Holland sitting out for a year, and then Kevon Thibodeau being the best pass rusher, but we're just going to pass up on him because of stupid little rumors. Yeah, I get
it. Gino, I'm keeping a close eye on as well. Utah linebacker Devin Lloyd. Didn't participate on the field in Mobile at the Senior Bowl. Was kind of disappointed there. I mean, again, his stock is pretty much cemented. He's going to be a first-round pick, one of the first linebackers off the board, top 2 between him and Nakobe Dean. But Dean is very good moving laterally. With Devin Lloyd, I do want to see how he moves side to side. He is such a good athlete coming downhill. You saw him actually rush the passer a lot with Utah, not just blitzing, but coming off the edge. Like they used him in many different areas. He's long, he's powerful. He's got good hands, good ball skills for a player of that size. I do want to see, though, how quick he can change direction and see, how fluid of an athlete he is in that area. And that could be the difference, again, not from him being a first or second round pick, but between him and Nakobe Dean, who is the top linebacker selected.
I just copied this over from Albert Breer. It kind of went into like what each drill measures, right?
Yeah.
And you want to see a guy like Devin Lloyd test out very well in that short shuttle drill, where you're down in a 3-point stance, you got your hand on the ground, you have to go 5 yards right, go back 10 yards to the left, and finish through where you were originally started. For a linebacker, think about that movement. You're going to step up, try and find your gap. You might have to slide 2 gaps to the right to try and fill, and you might have to chase back the opposite way.
Right, if it's play action, you got to get back. Yeah, there's a lot of responsibilities.
A ton of responsibilities for linebackers. So that area and like the 20-yard where you're running from the middle of the field to the sideline, his 20-yard time I'm very intrigued with as well, because I think Christian Harris, another great athletic linebacker, should test well.
Yeah.
Throw Muma in this category with Devin Lloyd, Lou. Like, I know the production is there. He looks like a good athlete on tape. I just want to back it up there as well, see how he moves around in the positional drills. Linebacker especially, Lou, I think this is also a group where there are a ton of different looks. I mean, Beaver's out of Cincinnati, man. Like, that kid's 6'4", and he should test great for a guy of his size, much like Xavier Collins did last year.
Absolutely. He had a great week in Mobile, too. So there's some linebackers to keep a close eye on. And, Gino, again, it's just fun when you see linebackers and defensive ends built that way. And then if they do perform like freaks at the combine, it definitely does help their stock, or it's just also for pure entertainment. Awesome to see, like, how is that guy built like that, moving like that? So it's going to be fun next week for sure. We'll lift off a couple more players coming up next. This is our 2022 NFL Scouting Combine preview right here on Locked On Eagles. Guys, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
When you're sitting on the couch next week watching all 4 days of the NFL Scouting Combine, it will be on primetime on NFL Network, if I'm not mistaken, but no free plugs for them. But we're going to do a plug for one of our great sponsors, because they're oh so delicious and oh so sweet to have while you're watching the NFL Combine, or before or after when you're listening to the Locked On Eagles podcast. That is Built Bar. And everybody, like I said many times, has given up on their New Year's resolutions. It's sad to see. But we're moving into a new calendar year, so if you want to start another one, start it on the first day of the NFL New Year and get some Built Bars to help you move along with that. Make sure you get their new delicious puffed churro flavor that is out, limited edition, unbelievably good if you like churros or just any sweets in general, because somebody like me who has a sweet tooth, instead of going to the candy jar, I go to the box of Built Bar. I love my mint brownie flavor. We know Lou loves peanut butter brownie. That's one of his favorite. I love the coconut brownie. That was an all-time great bar, in my opinion. 130 calories of calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Incredibly healthy, incredibly delicious, and you don't feel guilt. You don't feel full. You just feel nice and energized and ready to go. Go to Built.com today or BuiltBar.com. Either of them will redirect you, and make sure you get your Built Bar today.
All right, Eagles fans, one segment to go here on the week of shows before the NFL Scouting Combine. You can find all our podcasts this week on all podcast platforms, as well as on YouTube and on Twitter at Locked On Birds, at GC24_football, and at DiBiase LOE. A lot of players we're keeping a close eye on next week. You know, the big receivers, Treylon Burks and Drake London, Jahan Dotson from Penn State as well, George Karlaftis, the edge rusher from Purdue, Jermaine Johnson, you know, David Ajabo, Devin Lloyd at linebacker, Chad Muma, Christian Harris. There's a ton of players that definitely our eyes are going to be on. Gino, with one segment to go here, who's one final player that you're going to be keeping an eye on next week in Indy?
Before I do that, I just want to let our fans know the day-by-day breakdown of on-field workouts. So Thursday, March 3rd, you're going to get QBs, tight ends, and wide receivers. Friday, you're going to get offensive line and running backs.
Mm-hmm.
Saturday, primetime day, defensive line and linebackers. And then to finish it all off on Sunday, defensive backs and special teamers. And one of those guys that I believe should have the best combine, Lou, is going to be, he's going to be the caboose, going to be the end of this train, Kyle Hamilton. I think this kid has a chance to have that Byron Jones, that Obi Melinfonwu style safety combine where these guys go and show why they're the most important position on the field year after year. They're the best athletes on the field because what these guys have to do is utterly incredible. Their ability to cover space, come down and cover a guy like Rob Gronkowski in man-to-man coverage, come down and tackle a guy like Saquon Barkley. These safeties have to do it all. And Kyle Hamilton, who right now is projected to be a top 5 pick, Lou, if this kid comes out,
I've been seeing him at second overall sometimes now.
Yeah, if he comes out and runs a 4.4, jumps he could jump over 12 feet in the broad jump. I believe in the high jump he could get close to like 44, 45
stupid
inches.
Dolphins pick, man. It was at the top 3 all year, and Kyle Hamilton would have been the dream for this defense. Like, you could not have made a more perfect player for what Philly needs.
If you could do some sort of formula where you kind of like spell it out who had the best combine, and I think there are services that do that, I believe that there would be a good percentage of people that would put money on Kyle Hamilton walking away with that award. And that's why I love the safety position, is for freaks like this guy, the Derwin Jameses of the world. They just are game changers and are true athletes. Like, I believe Kyle Hamilton could go and be like a world-class sprinter if he really put his mind to it, or a basketball player, because nobody with that much athleticism shouldn't be able to jump 12 feet in the air with the running start.
Right.
And he does. Look at the film. The guy levitates.
Yeah. He might be, right now I've been seeing some mock drafts where he's second overall, but like you said, definitely a top 5 pick. Stupid Dolphins run those 7 games in a row, man. Really, really hurt it. But still, nonetheless, definitely keep a close eye on him next week at the Combine. One more for me. It's my guy, Liberty quarterback Malik Willis. But Gino, not really on the field, although vicariously I'm living through watching his 40 time because I didn't get to see Lamar do it. And I want to see what Malik Willis is going to run here. So definitely watching his 40 time, but more just like because Willis is such a long way to go with processing and vision. I shouldn't say such a long way to go, but it's his weakness coming into the league. I want to see I want to hear our teams impressed with him when it comes to the meetings, right? When he's on the whiteboard, are they confident that he can develop in those areas? Because to compare him to Josh Allen coming out of Wyoming, Allen was somebody that also was not polished in these areas, but Buffalo loved him on the whiteboard in their meeting, and they bet that it would click when he's in a better situation and he's not trying to be the hero at Wyoming where there's no NFL players, and the same with Willis at Liberty. I want to see, or I want to hear.
Bro, are you going to disrespect Marcus Epps like that? That is so disrespectful.
I am going to. But yeah, I just want to hear if they're impressed with him when it comes to the meetings, because he's going to test out well. You're going to see the whip of an arm he has on the field. But again, it's in shorts, and you can't really learn much from that we don't already know from the tape. I want to hear how he is on the whiteboard, because that's a key area that if teams are going to be willing to invest in him in the first round, they got to know that that's something more that, it was because he's young. It's because of the situation. It's something that can grow and develop over time. It's not a Paxton Lynch thing where this kid's just never going to get it.
Yeah, I think being a smart football player in this league will take you beyond any physical ability, in my opinion. I mean, to get to that point, you obviously have to have the physical ability to be considered one of the 300 plus people for the NFL Combine, right? So now it just comes down to the smarts. Like, do you get it? Do you get the game? There's that clip that I always loved watching when Carson was here in Philadelphia of his days at the Combine, where DiFilippo's sitting there, Howie's there, Doug is there, and I'm pretty sure Big Dom was somewhere in the background. He's around everywhere in Philadelphia. He's always lurking. But you just saw his ability to process a play in real time and talk them through it. Because on the field, like you said with Josh, I think that's a very good comparison. I don't compare Jalen Hurts and him. Don't think they're a similar style player. I think Jalen had much more production, much more finished product coming out of Alabama and Oklahoma. You look at Josh Allen. I didn't see it at all. I watched him play my Oregon Ducks, who had one of the worst secondaries in college football at the time, and the kid threw for 68 yards. And he plays against Air Force, who had like one of the worst defenses in the conference as well and couldn't do anything. But I wasn't in that meeting room. I wasn't there to see what the Bills heard and discussed because arguably none of what the quarterbacks do on the field really matters at the Combine. It all comes down to the medicals and what they say in the meetings at that point, because they've already broken down your throws. They're going to go through their selection, find what they want to talk to you about, polish up those areas. If it was maybe a mechanic thing, maybe you just didn't get it. Right. And ultimately, if a player does get it and they come out looking smart on the whiteboard, they really can process an NFL defense at that speed. You have the tools. Jamarcus Russell was the first overall pick, man. I mean, they're going to bet on traits no matter what, especially at that position. Regardless of who picks Malik Willis, they're going to do all the due diligence that they can to find out as much background information on his football as IQ as they can. So Malik Willis might not, quote unquote, win the Combine. He's going to test really well. We know that, but we already know he's a freak. But we might come months from now and hear stories of how impressive he was in those hotel rooms, how impressive he was in the meeting.
And that's what I'm looking for.
That's what, I think a lot of teams really need to figure that out, because you look at Carson Strong, the guy processes a pro-style offense all day long. Like, he can read double high, can read single high. Malik's game at Liberty really didn't like fit that 1-2-3 read. It was more based on his athleticism, the running back, and just a quick RPO game. But can he put it all together to be that 3-level style quarterback? And a big risk requires a big investment. And that investment is the time and effort that the scouts are putting in to find that out.
And that's part of what is crucial with the Combine for sure. All right, Gino, we'll continue to keep a close eye on the workouts, the meetings as well at the Scouting Combine next week, guys. Make sure you subscribe to Locked on Eagles, because we got 5 more episodes for you next week on all podcast platforms, on video as well, on YouTube. Subscribe to our Locked on Eagles YouTube channel. And we're always talking birds on Twitter. Hit us up at Locked on Birds, at GC24_football, and at DBLCLOE. Thank you for making Locked on Eagles your first listen each and every day. We'll see you on Monday for Mock Draft Monday. As always, thank you for downloading. Thank you for listening, and let's go Birds.
Fly, Eagles, fly.